Hello. I'm sorry, I'm going to break now the beautiful flow of French language and go to my broken English, but I hope we can manage to keep the communication thanks to the excellent work of the people who are translating for us. I really would like to thank, even briefly, all the people who have been involved in this amazing event, especially, of course, everyone from Villes, and and this great opportunity to discuss such an important issue. So I'm going to present about 25 minutes, and I think we will have some questions at the end, right? I think, yeah. So I'm going to talk about Tokyo, and this is very much related to what the previous discussion or the previous images, and I'm going to try to give some details. I'm an architect. I have my own office, and I also work as an academic in Tokyo at Keio University. The contents of today's presentations are pretty much related to this book. In fact, on the left is the English version, on the right is the Japanese version. This book was published, I think, in 2022. And the title is Emergent Tokyo, Designing the Spontaneous City. And the results of this book are the results of about 10 years of research on Tokyo, but also my practice of almost 20 years in Japan. And I think this practical knowledge was quite important. I'm going to give you some images of what I have been doing. I've been working in pretty much this situation for shrinking population areas, working in renovations of wooden buildings, but I also have worked in more like in central areas of Tokyo, and therefore I have been able to kind of have a glimpse of the several loopholes and several kind of special conditions that are happening in Tokyo. So I just show this to kind of emphasize the fact that this is not only theoretical knowledge, but pretty much knowledge from actually working here in this kind of seemingly messy situation. Well, I don't know how many of you have been in Tokyo, but if we take a photograph from one of the latest constructions, the Sky Tree, this is the view that we are going to have. And you can see that it's basically a pixelated city. It's a city made of very tiny, small buildings, with some exceptions. I think I can show here. Well, you have here like some higher buildings, and also you have here like in front of the Imperial Palace some skyscrapers, and also in Tokyo Bay, and you can see here the Mount Fuji at the back. But these new skyscrapers are practically new. Most of them, they appear since the year 2000. So we can say that Tokyo is mainly a city of a small scale. And my point is that what really makes the city of Tokyo amazing is precisely rather these smaller and very pixelated areas rather than the new large-scale redevelopments. And since we have a limited time, I'm going to just give you just snapshots of specific examples of what I consider the most clear patterns, urban patterns that kind of give us clues about what this kind of emergent city could be. We are using here the word organic, and I think emergent is also very related to this concept. Emergence is a concept from complexity science. The word emergence means the creation of order and functionality from the bottom up. It's a phenomenon that we can see in the organic world. We can see, for example, in the flying behavior of birds. They create amazing formations, but there is no actual leader when we see birds or when we see other kinds of animals. They create these shapes through local interactions. And my point is that we can actually find many spaces in Tokyo that also develop a kind of amazing functionality through this kind of emergent bottom-up process. Just to show you that they are not a kind of exceptional situations, I am showing here, I don't know if I can back, yeah. I am showing here like the 23 wards of Tokyo. These are the, and in red you can see their location. You can see that they are patterns across the city. Well, let's start with almost the purest example of what I called emergent urbanism. This would be the Yokocho alleys. I think recently they became very popular among tourists, so maybe some of you have been here. For example, this one, this is Golden Gai, it's called like this, or Golden Street in Shinjuku, one of the biggest stations in Japan. And this is, the Yokocho are these kind of districts of very tiny scale, mostly bars and restaurants that were created after the war. Here in this area more or less is like half of a soccer field. And in this area there are like 250 restaurants and bars. So you can imagine, I think this is the world's densest bar district. And everything is about tiny scale here. In some places, if you extend your hands, you will be able to touch the sides of the streets. And, but the most interesting thing from my viewpoint, and the book is filled with this kind of very accurate analysis through field work, is the scale of the bars themselves. Most of them, they have just place for, this is kind of a rather big one, places for 5 or to 10 people maximum. And everything is about smallness. And through our research, we found that owners and operators are actually very happy about that smallness. This is kind of counterintuitive because most of us would kind of enjoy bigger spaces, but they say it has advantages for them. They say they can operate their businesses by themselves. The rents are cheap. They are not expensive. Community is created through interactions because it's kind of natural for people to communicate in these kind of very tiny environments. And well, they are allowed to experiment. And in fact, one of the effects of these bars is that each of them is completely different. They are so creative. So each of them has a different music, different atmosphere, different drinks. They are allowed to experiment because the risks are relatively low, thanks to the small scale. But for me, the interesting effect is the emergent effect, which means what happens when we make a cluster of very tiny small businesses, given complete freedom together. We create, well, the Yokocho compounds. This is more or less an analysis of a kind of almost like an anatomical section through the city so you can see inside. And what we obtain is basically this sense of community through these interactions, but also micro-scale or microeconomy of scale, a microeconomy for agglomeration. So the opposite concept would be like economy of scale, which means getting a better economic situation through bigger buildings. In this case, is the opposite principle, the principle of having many small businesses concentrated in one area so that they can compete with each other, but also cooperate. In fact, in these areas, they cooperate. And they create this kind of situation of creativity, of freedom, etc. If you happen to be in Tokyo, I really recommend you go there. I think it's one of the most amazing places. Something very similar is happening in these kind of buildings. Of course, it would be the nightmare of any urbanist in Europe. But personally, I find these buildings very iconic. But let's go beyond the facades. These are the so-called zakkyo buildings. Zakkyo means coexisting mixture. For me, the interesting thing is what is happening inside. So again, here we see is that they are working almost like verticalized yokocho. And interestingly, like each floor is again small business, and they develop a way to connect through an elevator to the street. So they kind of verticalize the street, they verticalize the yokocho, creating at the same time a very active edge, very permeable edge to the street. So they don't destroy the city vibrancy when they develop upwards. Another interesting effect is that they are super adaptable. We kind of took a lot of time to go through municipal registers and check what was going on in these streets from the 50s and to recently. And we can see here that basically the sides of the plots haven't changed, but they grow upwards. And the summary of this graph is here. We can see here that at the beginning, most of them were offices, but slowly they became more like recreational uses. And we are probably seeing from now on, again, an increase of office. This is my guess. So what we see is that they are adaptable. They can change and they can adapt to each circumstance without the need to an overall huge redevelopment that is often the case in other places of Tokyo. But to finish, I would like to concentrate on maybe one of the most interesting patterns. I cannot go through all of them, which are the dense low-rise neighborhoods. If you take a train from Narita Airport, from Tokyo, and you will be a landscape like this, you will see this, which again, for myself, when I first came to Japan, I thought that this was kind of failed urbanism. This was really a mess because, in fact, sorry, I think I can, yeah. In fact, they were using a kind of low-rise typology in a situation which was not like a suburban situation with lots of greenery, lots of gardens, but very compact, very dense, with a high density of land coverage. At the same time, you have like some important infrastructure going through, like these arterial roads, and along them you can see like higher buildings, but most of the buildings are low-rise. This is just a map to prove that this is not something exceptional. These are some mapping that we did using Tokyo Metropolitan's government data. And here we mapped exclusively residential buildings with a population density of 20,000 persons per square kilometer. 20,000 persons per square kilometer, so that's still lower than central Paris, but denser than many cities, especially I would say in the most suburban areas. And the other condition was that they should be like 3 floors or less. So it's really like the most extreme case of dense, low-rise neighborhoods. And we did research on these areas. I'm going to just show you one case. This is the example that I was showing in the photographs before. And what we can see here, I think I need to get a little bit more distance to really see. What we can see here is that there are like some big infrastructure like these arterial roads that were built after the war. We have also elevated trains. The station is here, but the rest is really kind of this labyrinthic kind of low-rise area. We also can identify a shopping street. But what is going on? I mean, how is life here? Well, this is for me more like a theoretical question, because in fact I have been living in these kind of areas most of my period in Tokyo. These areas really appeared in an organic way. 100 years ago, most of them, they were just like bamboo forests or agricultural fields, and slowly with the introduction of railways very early, in the case in Japan, in the 1920s, they developed, but without an overall grid that was trying to organize everything, but more like with local patterns like this one. And after the war, we see that authorities kind of widened some streets, but the rest was really kept, and the buildings themselves were being renovated and rebuilt slowly in the small scale. And now this is the situation now. In the situation now that we can see if we just take a walk is this kind of landscape, which probably is not particularly remarkable at first glance, but we can observe that the scale is very intimate. People kind of take care of putting greenery outside. We have lots of desires here, like David was mentioning here, like these strange kind of additions to buildings. So it's a city that allows those desires to be reflected in a very immediate way. Positive things, for example, the effect of pedestrian cities or walkable cities is kind of completely natural here. We can see like how bicycles, pedestrian cars are sharing space. And this is this kind of shopping street where all the local commerce is concentrated. So what can we learn? What lessons can we extract from these areas? Well, maybe looking at these maps, we can observe certain patterns. First of all, you will notice, that in this first map, that buildings are isolated from each other, so they create lots of gap spaces. This is very typical as a result of Japanese regulation. But this, rather than a problem, is actively used by people to put greenery, bicycles. They are gap spaces, but are actively used. And they are kind of buffer zones where those extra desires are happening of extending their houses according to different conditions and different situations. Also, we can see that there is an extreme diversity of street widths. This is this arterial road I was mentioning before, but then there is a slower roads, and then there is this almost labyrinthic, almost continuously changing world of the alleys. And interestingly, this is what is basically, for example, some cities in Europe are trying now, like Barcelona with the super blocks. This is already happening from the post-war in Tokyo, which is people actually, you don't want to drive here inside. If all the through traffic is going to go through this arterial road. If you go in this direction, you go here. So unless you really know these areas, you are not going to go there. And this is what naturally, without prohibiting people from entering, kind of incentivizes people to not to go into those more intimate communities. Another characteristic of Tokyo is that zoning is very light, and therefore it is almost free, except in exclusively industrial areas. The zoning is quite free, and therefore you can see here in this slide that even if this started as a residential area, you have like light industry, small offices, boutiques, restaurants, but especially in this area, which is the shopping promenade. I could continue, but the point is, for example, if you see here, greenery is again like a kind of emergent property, because each one is put in the small plots, small kind of micro gardens, and as a whole, they create in this emergent manner a sense of greenery. Here is a plot of all the entrances and all the windows across or along the street, and we can actually, I think that contributes to the sense of safety that we can experience in Japanese cities, because you are walking streets in which you can feel the presence of people, and therefore this works as it prevents crime. And also another important thing is that in Japan, when you buy a car, you also need to buy a parking. So you cannot park your car on the street, and people actually use gap spaces and use like different, freely they manage the way to put parking space within their plots, and therefore you don't see like this kind of, you don't feel that the streets are dominated by cars. So basically, to summarize, maybe with this drawing, I mean, the book has lots of these kind of drawings. I think Tokyo is this organic city in which you can, there is a combination of huge infrastructure, or most master planning is concentrated on this kind of infrastructure, like railways, arterial roads, and of course, disaster prevention, which is in the case of Japan very important. But the rest of it is pretty much, I would say, a light approach to planning, in which citizens are quite free to change their own houses. There is a light zoning, and also there is a kind of, the entry to entrepreneurship is quite easy, with relatively low taxes, etc. So what we have is this situation in which there is a kind of dynamism from the bottom combined with a light planning from the top, which creates, I think, at least that is the point, or my main claim, which creates this vibrancy that everyone can experience when one goes to Tokyo. And well, maybe what many of you are thinking is, okay, this sounds very good, but okay, we are planners, we are designers, we are architects, what can we do? If everything is about leaving that energy, allowing that energy from the bottom to create that vibrancy, maybe we shouldn't do anything, maybe we should just let the city be. And my reply to that is that, in fact, even if we should not try to design how the end results of that emergent process looks like, we should be aware of the preconditions that allow that emergence to occur. And some of those preconditions are listed here. I think, at least in the case of Tokyo, and I guess this applies to many cities also all around the world, having numerous owners and operators, even though many developers, large-scale developers in Tokyo complain about that, I think it's in fact, or has beneficial effects. The fact of having many small plots is in fact something not necessarily negative. In the case of Tokyo, I would say is positive. Also allowing these economies of agglomeration to emerge, not thinking only about economies of scale. Not all the problems of the city should be solved by making cities more efficient, by making bigger buildings, taller buildings, larger streets. We can obtain also beneficial effects by economies of agglomeration. This is something that sometimes gets lost in the discussion of cities. And the small scale that allows individuals and small communities to actually operate on their own environments, making the environments their own space. And this effect that I was talking in the case of Tokyo buildings of permeable and inclusive boundaries, how buildings, by having those permeable relationship with the street, they allow to benefit from the relationship with public space rather than ending up killing public space, which is what very often happens with large-scale redevelopments. And maybe the last but the most important one is this principle of allowing cities to evolve from the pre-existing. from the pre-existing urban fabric in a bottom-up incremental way, rather than insisting on kind of replacing them with new developments, which is unfortunately one of the approaches that is also happening in Tokyo. So I would say that these are some of the principles that we could apply, and I guess, and this maybe would be my main interest today, to know your opinion, if this applies to your cities too. Thank you very much.